Okay, well, welcome everybody to Design and Discourse. Today is going to be really exciting. We have two great speakers talking about all things material, tectonics, sustainability, cool building methods. So I'm really excited to see this research. First up, we have Grayce Sprecksell, and who will actually be presenting. Her presentation is Stones Have Personalities Too. And then we will have Celia Dissinger. All right, I'm going to pass the floor off to Grayce.
All right, let me share my screen. All right. In 1 second.
Sure.
Oh. All right. Full screen. Yep. This thing's only give me one. There we go. Okay.
Cool.
All right. Well, hi everyone. My name is Grayce Sprecksell, and this is my senior capstone, which is called Stones Have Personalities Too. This will be looking into self-sufficiency as a principle for sustainability. So going into what I will be talking about, I will be going through the research that supports my topic, along with the research that will drive my design decisions. Also, precedents and typologies that support self-sufficiency as a design principle for sustainability will also be talked about. Lastly, I will be going into my site and the research that led me to ultimately choose the specific site. So getting into my abstract, I'm going to read it. The natural environment is a system we as humans can learn from. We, after all, benefit from the system of nature. It is the idea that there are three groups who inhabit the built environment, that is flora, fauna, and human. By working together, we can create a circular approach to sustainable development. What it means to be self-sufficient is to work alongside nature and what it has to offer. Creating a built environment that benefits all four tiers of sustainability can create a circular approach to sustainable systems that will benefit all three groups who inhabit the built environment. Creating an environment that works together in a circular approach with nature can create sustainable solutions that in favor create a sustainable future. Looking into flora and fauna that are endangered in a specific area creates an understanding of what needs to be incorporated into the environment that will pave the way for a sustainable future. Coexisting with nature starts with creating an environment where all can thrive. This research explores biomimicry as a circular approach, social, cultural, economic, and environmental sustainability factors, as well as form and function as a natural source. By exploring these key objectives, we can prove that self-sufficiency is a principle that achieves sustainable architecture in various dimensions. So I'm going to read just the first paragraph of my thesis statement. Sustainability has many different interpretations, but when it comes to the built environment, there's a lot that could be done to create a self-sustainable experience. Nature and the overall process of systems should not be an afterthought when it comes to the built environment. Human beings and nature should be equal partners to one another in the fight for sustainable solutions, using form, function, and sustainable development to promote and shed light on sustainable practices within the built environment. Diving right into my area of focus, I will be analyzing the small town of Charlevoix, Michigan. I chose this town due to the level of tourism during the summer months. This can ultimately be used to promote sustainability in places where tourism infrastructure is taking over. Tourism infrastructure causes a loss in biodiversity, which leads to environmental deficiency. But looking into promotion of sustainable living through the use of tourism can also offer year-round residents opportunities to work while tourists support the economic feasibility of the town. The attractions that draw in tourists can also be seen below, right here. And so getting into my research, I'll be first talking about biomimicry. Biomimicry is the practice of using nature to balance out the human needs and wants from within the environment while allowing nature to thrive. It expresses the reuse and reincorporation of natural resources. It also looks at the function of behavior of organisms and ecosystems, as well as the communication and management as a whole. It overall is the inspiration from nature's forms and processes. The circular economy is the reuse and regeneration of products and materials. It's a different approach to the generic linear economy. It overall is moving from a take, make, waste linear economy to a circular economy, supporting a natural process that allows more room for nature and humans to thrive. Biomimicry and the circular economy actually correlate with one another in the fight for sustainability through the idea of a closed-loop system with the belief that nature and the human environment will ultimately thrive. So overall, biomimicry and the circular economy are aligned in their fundamental principles and goals, serving as a complementary strategy for fostering sustainable innovation and managing resources. By integrating these concepts, businesses and communities can develop a more self-sufficient environment within the built environment that benefits both the people, and the ecosystems that are involved. This all led me to looking into the 4 tiers of sustainability or sustainable development. So all 4 tiers of sustainable development play a vital role in enhancing the overall well-being of individuals, communities, and the planet. But by attending to various aspects of sustainability and adopting a comprehensive approach that incorporates environmental, social, economic, and cultural considerations, these tiers then can work towards creating a more self-sufficient future for all. So getting into some of the definitions of each, environmental is the practice of using nature to balance out the human needs and wants from within the environment, while cultural is the practice of inclusion and exchange while promoting and preserving cultural beliefs and heritage. Social is the practice of creating social systems that aim to meet human needs at an equality level, while economical is the practice of creating a balance between economic growth and the environmental impact with the goal to create a more livable future. All of these can be seen within the built environment, but for example, sustainable agriculture, water management, education, recycling, and reducing our energy production are only just a few of these examples. This graphic depicts how each of the tiers are being utilized currently in the town of Charlevoix. And this shows me how these 4 tiers of sustainable development can be better implemented to support the human relationships with nature while supporting the community as a whole. So within a community filled with tourism, how can I better implement these sustainable development factors to create a more self-sufficient and reliable approach within the tourism industry? And that is ultimately my goal with this graphic, is to ask myself that question and pull out the research that I found from these 4 tiers. So secondly, diving deeper into these, I wanted to give examples of the impacts on the 4 tiers and what the issue really is. So starting with environmental, this shows how tourism infrastructure in the town of Charlevoix is causing a loss of biodiversity. So as you can see, the expansion of tourism infrastructure, which includes hotels, roads, and parks, as you can see here, Weathering Terrace, Hotel Earl, and Edgewater, all parts of tourism infrastructure, it all leads to habitat destruction. So clearing out land for these infrastructures, it really ultimately disrupts ecosystems, leading to the loss of biodiversity. Overall, we really need an ecological balance by focusing on habitat restoration, and then we can create the balance which in favor could support biodiversity through the tourism industry. Secondly, getting into cultural, there are 2 subgroups that support the overall benefit of Charlevoix. These are year-round residents and tourists. This explains the benefit of each of these groups, specifically in Charlevoix, and to show how important they are to the overall well-being of the community. Creating a built environment where both subgroups can be supported can create equality for all, proving that cultural sustainability also can be improved. Next is social. Social sustainability really stuck out to me, as this graphic shows the top 4 major employers in Charlevoix County. It took me back, as I assumed tourism infrastructure was probably a leading employer in this town, but when I noticed that they were not, I realized that there needed to be a change to implement tourism to benefit the overall economy of the town and specifically the year-round residents. So as you can see here, St. Mary's Cement Plant, Harbor Industries, Northwest Michigan Community Mental Health, Munson Healthcare of Charlevoix Hospital these are all the 4 major employers of Charlevoix County. And it really surprised me that tourism is not benefiting the employers of Charlevoix County. Next, getting into economical, everyone in the US is seeing a rise in prices, and these issues are related to economic sustainability simply due to the supply chain being less efficient for their consumers due to the high prices and the harmful emissions in each stage of production. But by creating an economical, sustainable solution, it is possible with the use of sustainable agriculture throughout communities. And this graphic shows the prices that are increasing in each food item to hopefully depict the scarcity of supplies and funds families will continue to face if there's not a change. Next, I looked into, realizing that there was a loss in biodiversity, it made me question what is needed and what is currently benefiting the state of Michigan. So I first looked into endangered flora and fauna. Endangered species signifies a loss in biodiversity, which is crucial for the stability of ecosystems. Each species contributes to ecosystem's balance, and the loss of even one species can have a rippling effect on others. Through my research, I discovered interdependencies among many of these species, where the loss of one flora can precipitate the decline of an associated fauna. This insight informs my design approach and decisions moving forward. The utilization of native species also improves and encourages biodiversity within the community. The red oak, black cherry, trembling aspen, and the white birch were some of the most prominent native flora within Charlevoix, and this graphic depicts the native flora of Charlevoix and the fauna that inhabits this flora. This allows me to fully understand what vegetation should be encouraged throughout the built environment to bring back the need for biodiversity within our tourism industry. This all led me to looking into Earl Young. Earl Young is a well-known self-taught architect who made his mark in the small town of Charlevoix, mostly known for his iconic mushroom houses. One of the most interesting facts about Earl is that he never created design documentation to bring his creative ideas to life. He was a mysterious man that most will actually never fully understand, yet he left his mark in the small town of Charlevoix, in which tourists find very fascinating. Through research, I will dive into Earl Young's love for nature and the built environment. Earl specifically learned a lot from nature, and I believe those who have a passion for design can also learn from Earl Young. Earl Young created stone houses out of locally sourced boulders from Lake Michigan. The pattern to point out in Earl's work is his incorporation of easily accessible and readily available materials. Red sandstone and Onaway limestone were both found in Michigan around the time Earl was building. Not to mention, Earl also incorporated findings from building sites and items acquired from trips he used to take. Using locally sourced materials reduced the need to extract and ship products, which in favor reduces the overall carbon footprint. There were 3 primary stones Earl sourced, which were regular stones from Lake Michigan, red sandstone, and Onaway limestone, which is used on the exterior and on the fireplaces throughout his designs. As previously talked about, Charlevoix is known for tourism. Earl Young created the most utilized commercial hospitality buildings right in the heart of downtown Charlevoix. The Weathering Terrace is a motel-styled building that brings in many families each year, as you can see right here. Over here is Hotel Earl, which was just previously renovated and is another hotel that many people book a year in advance. And then down here is the Weather Vane. It is a restaurant that is right down the street from both of these hotels. And overall, Earl Young is a large contributor to the tourist in Charlevoix County. One of the most fascinating finds of Earl is Earl Young incorporated nature in all of his design work. Some examples include the use of biomimetic design, but not necessarily the utilization of ecosystems and organism systems, but rather the form of nature. You can see on the building on the top right here. Seagulls were a main focus point for Earl. He had yet again another fascination with the forms of nature. Earl Young also focused on the topography of the land. His continuous roof lines followed the form of the land to create an art form that works with nature rather than against it. The way his designs lay on the land create a harmonic feel as if they were also meant to be there. The mimicry of nature in each of his buildings create a sense of place in which all designers could learn from. So looking into all of these issues within the tourism industry, but specifically in Charlevoix, I was really curious as to how we as a society can live self-sufficiently to perform sustainably. And that brought me into looking into earthship typologies. So what is an earthship? An earthship is an autonomous housing typology that operates on a self-sufficient basis. The structure of the building is mainly characterized by tires. The tire walls of an earthship allows the reuse and reincorporation of materials into the built environment. These tire walls also store thermal mass, which is actually the main heating and cooling source for an earthship. The tire walls absorb solar heat during the day and release it gradually at night, helping to regulate the indoor temperatures passively. But the tire walls are also created by pounding earth or, for example, gravel into the tire over a layer of cardboard. Some people question the issue of tire off-gassing, yet encapsulating the tire with rammed earth will diminish the risk of indoor off-gassing exposure. So the graphic on the left shows some different iterations and evolutions of an earthship tire wall. The underlying characteristics of an earthship include solar heating and cooling, solar and wind power systems, rainwater harvesting, solar hot water heating, along with black and gray water treatment systems. The south portion of the building contains a greenhouse that takes in solar gain. And on the south wall as well, it also includes a gray water planter that recycles the water from the sink, shower, and laundry to ultimately water the plants, creating a food source. The roof must be slanted to access the most solar gain, but it also needs to collect rainwater for harvesting in the water cisterns as seen in this graphic over here. And then also the north-facing wall is primarily made of tires and rammed earth, as you can see right here. So how is an Earthship actually self-sufficient? How does it operate? Well, the 6 principles that are on the left all contribute to the success of an Earthship operating self-sufficiently, and in which guides the design and construction of an Earthship. Some key takeaways to make sure this operates properly is to orient the building to maximize solar exposure, the use and reuse of thermal mass materials to regulate indoor temperatures, and incorporating energy efficient design features like passive solar heating and natural lighting. Excuse me. We need to balance our energy, water, and food needs in harmony with our environment, pretty much. On the right, you can see passive heating and cooling strategies. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. So on the right, you can see passive heating and cooling strategies of an Earthship. And the Earthship will utilize the bottom, which is isolated gain. An isolated gain system typically includes a solar collector, which is a separate component of the building or from the building itself. The collector is designed to maximize the absorption of sunlight. This system is utilized throughout the greenhouse of an Earthship. And then this brought me into looking into how is an Earthship actually benefiting the issues that are surrounding our environment. So this typology is beneficial to the environment as a whole. Earthship residents are less vulnerable to the impacts of water scarcity and can maintain a reliable water supply through the use of rainwater harvesting and gray water recycling, as well as the conservation of water. This can ultimately be used as a promotion tool to teach others how to conserve their own use of water. Another benefit includes the reduction of energy consumption. Oh my goodness. Residential and commercial spaces have a large influence on CO2 emissions dispersed when Earthships use, sorry, give me 1 second. Solar panels and wind turbines to generate electricity. And overall, it utilizes passive design to its full potential. Oh my goodness. Okay, knowing climate has a large impact on an Earthship, I wanted to see if it is a possibility to utilize this typology in the state of Michigan. I met John and Shelley from Door, Michigan, who gave me a tour of their Earthship home that is actually still being constructed. On the right is a graphic showing their site and some of my key takeaways that had to do with climate considerations. The wind, the sun path, and the topography were the 3 most important pieces of an Earthship. The topography is important due to the readily and easily accessible use of land to use for the tire wall and rammed earth. John actually stated that they looked at over 70 sites before ultimately choosing this site, specifically due to the large array of earth available on their site. This is a graphic of John and Shelley's Earthship with key takeaways from my visit. One large key takeaway was how to regulate this building as a code-compliant structure. Being code-compliant is a hard task when creating an Earthship, especially in Michigan. An egress pit is needed to be put in. So it is on the top of the bermed wall on the north side, and it allows for access straight outside. Another interesting point was that the structure needed to be an add-on rather than a standalone occupancy. But overall, Earthships are a beneficial typology when it comes to being self-sufficient and remaining sustainable, and that is what I found in my research. Next is my site analysis. So this all led me to choosing a site in Charlevoix, Michigan. This is the Weathering Terrace, which is one of Earl Young's tourist destinations. I chose this site due to the level of tourism within the city, and will be using the site to promote the use of self-sufficiency within the built environment. On this map, you can see the selected location and then the surrounding tourism infrastructure highlighted in maroon. Next, because my climate considerations were very important, it will be important to incorporate within this Earthship typology as well, because that's what will be included in my final production. And then I looked into visual connections, including the visual connections that will occur during your stay at the Weathering Terrace, which include retail, residential, and beach access. And then I also looked into the topography of the site for easily and readily accessible earth and the sun path for summer and winter. And that is all I have to show for you today. I definitely have a lot more, but this is what I wanted to show from my past fall research. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Grayce.
Yeah.
All right, so next we will hear from Celia.
Yeah. Okay. just get my screen shared here. You're good. Okay. Hello, my name is Celia Dissinger, and this is my senior capstone project, Reimagining Comfort, Designing for Climate Resilience. I have chosen the topic of designing for climate change with the intention of acquiring knowledge about a pressing global issue that I believe warrants the attention and understanding of the design industry. As an emerging member of the professional interior design community, I sense a responsibility to familiarize myself with the current environmental issues and explore how design can play a role. While I recognize that design alone cannot rectify all the damage inflicted upon our atmosphere, I firmly believe it can assist society in adapting to the new environmental challenges that we face. So before we dive into the research, I'd like to read my thesis statement as well as my project objective. So my thesis statement is the constructed environment can play a pivotal role in reducing human energy consumption by employing passive design strategies and optimizing a structure's ability to adapt to its environment. And my project objective is redefining comfort amidst a climate crisis, involves prioritizing sustainability, selecting green building materials, and focusing on optimizing occupant well-being. The architecture will incorporate features enabling it to store and release thermal energy, thereby adapting to the escalating temperatures of its surroundings. Diving right in, I'd like to define climate change and global warming because they are two separate things. I would like to preface that my research has prioritized humans' contribution to climate change, so I have focused on what we have done since the booming of the Industrial Revolution. There is a timeline in my booklet on page 5. Moving forward, climate change refers to the significant variation of average weather conditions becoming, for example, warmer, wetter, or drier over several decades or longer. It is the longer-term trend that differentiates climate change from natural weather variability. Whereas global warming is the unusually rapid increase in Earth's average surface temperature over the past century, primarily due to the greenhouse gases released by people burning fossil fuels. The existing condition of our environment can be attributed to numerous factors, but one crucial aspect worth highlighting is the element within our control. Human involvement in exacerbating global warming manifests in various ways. Among these, our most significant contributions stem from the combustion of fossil fuels, our transportation systems, deforestation, and the production and consumption of goods. And all of this is causing our environment to change. The noteworthy escalation in temperatures has garnered worldwide attention. In the past year alone, there has been a substantial surge in temperatures, having a big influence on our atmospheric conditions. This surge is mostly attributable to the combustion of fossil fuels, resulting in unprecedented temperature fluctuations and the release of harmful gases into our atmosphere. Gases such as formaldehyde, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and many more that can have a detrimental effect on our bodies. Aside from the impacts climate change can have on our bodies, it also can cause some pretty serious natural disasters, such as wildfires, which are becoming more and more common. The one last year in California burned for so long that it released an amount of carbon that is equivalent to 1 year's worth of driving cars. And with the temperatures slowly growing, we're experiencing more drought, which can be the perfect fuel for wildfires. Drought is something that sometimes flies under the radar, but the natural disaster that hurts our economy the most is drought. In my interview with Dr. Cynthia Pietras, a professor here at Western who lectures on human behavior and climate change, had said something interesting about drought being one of the things that could really turn people against each other if we truly experienced a shortage of clean food, which I believe we're starting to see a little bit of today. Tsunamis are one of the most detrimental of natural disasters and are mostly caused by earthquakes, landslides, and volcanic activity, but can also simply be caused by certain weather. Landslides can be caused by a number of different things, but a change in water level is something that is slowly happening as our planet warms even more. The important thing to note is that all of these disasters impact how humans behave. A wildfire can completely devastate a home or an entire community, as can drought, a tsunami, or a landslide. And I'd like to point out that these 4 natural disasters are just some of the most detrimental ones that I took a look at, but there are so many more that impact how humans behave as well. So after taking a dive into the environmental impacts of climate change, I wanted to see what exactly the consequences are for our bodies. So there are some indirect and direct impacts on our health from exposure to extreme heat. The indirect impacts include an impact on health services, so an increased number of ambulance calls and hospital admissions, and with that, a slower response time of medical attention and a shortage of the storage of medications. Increased transmission of food and waterborne disease, as well as a bloom of marine algae. Disruption of infrastructure, including power, water, transportation, and productivity. The direct impacts include heat illness, so dehydration, heat cramps, heat stroke, accelerated death from respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, or other chronic diseases, and hospitalization due to respiratory disease, diabetes, renal disease, stroke, and mental health conditions. And the people who are most at risk due to this increase in temperature are athletes, the homeless, the elderly, the disabled, pregnant women, people whose jobs are outdoors, children, or those with existing conditions. Overall, rapid surges in heat impose effects on the body's ability to regulate its internal temperature, potentially resulting in a range of health issues. Such extreme heat conditions can strain the body, causing heat-related illnesses and placing considerable pressure on essential resources, including medical care facilities and services. The flip side of that is that although temperatures are rising, we still need the sun in order to continue in our normal, natural human patterns. For example, due to our circadian rhythm, we rely on the sun's pattern. It helps regulate our body's sleeping patterns and even our blood circulation. As you can see from this graphic, we can almost pinpoint the exact time that we have our greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength. 7 p.m. is when our highest body temperature is, and 4 a.m. is our lowest. And 9 p.m. is when the melatonin secretion starts in our brains, and at 7 a.m. that stops. Our deepest sleep is at 2 a.m. So as you can see, the sun is really regulating our bodies. And some of the advantages to that are a lowered rate of depressive symptoms, fewer insomnia symptoms, less fatigue, a heightened mood due to increased vitamin D. It helps strengthen our bones and again regulates the circadian rhythm. Some of the disadvantages include an increased risk of melanoma. The UV radiation can cause cataracts over time. It ages our skin faster and also obviously burns it occasionally. So how do we create a built environment that fosters the natural daylight, but also protects from its harmful rays? Well, let's recall that facades mediate between outdoor conditions and desired indoor comfort conditions. Temperature, humidity, water, wind, solar energy, light views, and more. While mechanical systems provide the actual heating and cooling, their size, cost, and energy use is a result of massing and facade design. This is important because 90% of our time is spent indoors, so ensuring that those indoor environments are comfortable and are equipped with clean air is so important. These are some different ways to mitigate the sunlight. So I've just done some graphics of the most common shading techniques and also pinpointed their ideal orientation when used, as well as the view restriction. Diving deeper into strategies that can further help mitigate the sunlight exposure, as well as some examples of good and bad circulation. Starting with an atrium, atriums are a strategy that allow copious amounts of natural light to penetrate the space while giving shelter from the natural elements. Typical atrium configurations can be totally surrounded by building elements or partially enclosed. They may be top-lit, side-lit, or a combination of both. Clerestory windows are typically located on the upper end of tall walls while bringing glare-free light into the space. They also keep the privacy of the space given their higher location. Clerestory windows are also known for being very aesthetically pleasing in a space. Light shelves are located directly below skylights or clerestories. They bounce light back toward the ceiling and provide good indirect lighting to a large room. Light shelves can also block glare from overhead sun when skylight placement options are limited. Now, light wells reduce the need for artificial lighting. They offer diffused daylighting into adjoining rooms in more abundance than other strategies. They also indirectly create a central space in a building, which can be helpful for wayfinding. The takeaway from the ventilation graphic is that by creating openings at the proper height, we can help clean air circulate through the space at a more consistent rate. Moving along to a building technique that can have a colossal impact on the thermal comfort of a space, thermal massing. So there are certain materials that just naturally are better at absorbing or retaining heat. Some of those materials include concrete, brick, or limestone. This graph is showing the trend of thermal comfort in a space with high and low thermal mass. As you can see, the solid orange line is the external temperature and the dotted orange line is a building with low thermal mass. That more controlled blue line is a building with high thermal mass. If a building isn't equipped with the correct facade and insulation for its environment, its thermal comfort will fluctuate with the outside air. Now I'm going to share a precedent study that I found. I wanted to find a bermed building that was utilizing some of the passive design strategies that I was mentioning earlier. So this is the Ramat Hanadiv Visiting Center in Israel. And my favorite thing about this isometric view is that it's hard to tell there's even a building there because of the thermal massing with earth. It kind of blends into its surroundings. And also from this isometric view, you can kind of tell that they broke the building up into a few different parts, which also kind of helps give the building another face to allow sunlight to come in, seeing as a lot of that building is covered in earth. I also pointed out kind of some of the shading strategies that they use on exterior walkways, as well as this light well, which as you can see is bringing in a decent amount of natural light. And the sections here are showcasing the level of thermal mass that they used on top of the building. So I only took a look at two precedents looking at the actual space, and then two technology studies and two facade studies. So this is one of the technology studies that I've been waiting to use in a project. It's called Carbon Cure Concrete. And these are the steps they take to help reduce carbon emissions. So they take the waste CO2 emissions that are collected from local industrial emitters by gas companies and then purified. The purified CO2 is stored on site at the concrete plant and connected to the Carbon Cure technology. Carbon Cure then injects CO2 into the concrete during mixing, resulting in the same concrete with less carbon. And private and public projects are then built with Carbon Cure concrete, reducing embodied carbon in new buildings. And the Carbon Cure system can be applied to many different things. It can be used in commercial projects, residential projects, sidewalks, or pillars. So getting into some of the considerations that have really followed me into this spring semester, as I was researching and reading about all of the tragedy that natural disasters and a rise in temperature can cause, I wanted to know where these catastrophes were happening most frequently. So with each drought, the country experiences an estimated economic loss of $9.6 billion, and these are the top 5 cities that encounter drought most frequently. In the US, a typical fire season used to last for 4 months. Now fire seasons usually last up to 8 months, and these are the top 10 states with the highest number of acres burned by wildfires. The number of people that have experienced heat wave is 65.2 million, and these are the top 5 cities with a record-breaking heat wave in the summer of 2022. The emissions into the atmosphere in 2020 reached 68 million, and these are the top 10 cities with the most air pollution in 2022. And the percentage of polluted rivers and streams in the United States is 50%, and these are the top 10 states with the most polluted rivers and streams in 2022. The important thing to note about this information is that 4 out of 5 lists has California on it, and the other states mentioned the most are Oregon, Arizona, and Texas. So with that information in mind, I decided to take a closer look at California. California has 7 to 8 different microclimates. In Southern California, there are 5 to 7 different microclimates. A microclimate is a small area within the surrounding larger area with a different climate. These microclimates are most distinct in summer and are mostly defined by temperature and humidity. On a typical summer day, it could be 65 degrees and cloudy at the beach and 90 degrees and sunny just 10 miles away. This temperature difference is driven by topography. The mountain chain separates the 2 microclimates. On one side, you have cold, moist air adjacent to the ocean, and on the other side, you have hot, dry air. This is the case between Los Angeles County beaches and the San Fernando Valley. 10 miles separate these 2 microclimates. In general, the farther inland you live, the warmer it gets. So this is Bakersfield, California. And as you can see from this topography map, Bakersfield is kind of nestled in this little valley. And this graphic on the right is depicting how the air circulation works in a valley. This is a temperature range graph and a sky coverage graph of Bakersfield, California. And as you can see from these graphs, the month that reaches the highest temperature also coincides with the month that has the least amount of cloud coverage. So this automatically tells me that the month of August is the extreme that I want to design for. This is the site that I picked. It is currently vacant, but was previously used as an office building. The building itself faces almost due south and is currently around 16,000 square feet with 3 floors, and it sits on about 1.5 acres. And that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. Those 2 presentations together have a lot in common, but are very different from one another. And so I think I might kick off our Q&A session here by asking what motivated each one of you to, specify that research area or this project area for yourself. And then for anybody that has a question, feel free to unmute and ask questions or even type them in the chat.
Okay, so sorry, could you mind repeating that? I was moving around.
Oh, yeah. So sorry. Yeah, so I'm curious what motivated each one of you to pursue the research directions that you did or the topic directions.
Yeah, so for me, I knew that as an emerging professional, a big topic in design nowadays is sustainability and green spaces. And so I wanted for myself to kind of grow my knowledge base in that area so that as I go into the industry, I have a little bit of background in it as it is such a huge topic. I think a lot of different firms, whether it's residential or commercial, are really trying to get their foot in the door with that sustainability. So yeah, for me, it was really just about gaining that knowledge so that I have that when I go out into the industry.
And then for me, I would say, like she said, I've always been really interested in sustainability. But growing up in Charlevoix, the tourism industry was very prominent, and it was also not the most positive thing environmentally. Growing up, I definitely realized that, and I also realized that there was opportunities that were not being taken to benefit both of the tourist and the year-round residents. And I also Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of wanted to see how we as people, or even, yeah, just as the human environment can live self-sufficiently and not be reliant on the issues that we have going on in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I can really appreciate that personal to professional um lineage there. So one question that I have too, and I often get asked this question a lot, so I feel like maybe this is going to be helpful for a lot of people here. Um, Grayce, you covered a lot of research that looked at urban scale and some architectural. And then Celia, you were looking at kind of environmental and architectural. So how do you now take that research and all that knowledge and apply it to an interior architecture based project, if that is your goal?
Yeah, so I think a lot of my research mainly kind of started in just looking at the issue, looking at our main problem, what it was doing to our environment and what it does to our bodies. And then with that, kind of looking at almost the bare minimum of what we can do, what we can practice in design with every design, because a lot of the strategies that I'm looking at are, I don't want to say simple fixes, but they're very easy to apply. Um, and I know a couple of different times, I think like when we did this last midterm, someone kind of commented that I was doing kind of a how-to to create kind of not a self-sufficient, but almost a self-sufficient building that is going to be most economically and environmentally beneficial.
And then for me, I kind of started my research looking into ecosystems. So I guess I could say maybe biomimicry I took from Earl Young in a sense of just his form, not the actual natural process of biomimicry. So kind of that kicked off my research into looking into how even our natural ecosystems, how do they communicate? How do they manage their built environment? How do they create a system that works and is benefiting the environment as a whole? And how can we as humans mimic that to create a system that is ultimately going to allow our planet to thrive? So that was kind of like my biggest kickoff into my research, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
that,
think one of like my favorite kind of findings was that the way we used to design decades ago or even like hundreds of years ago was we designed for the environment. You know, they were placing windows strategically to either catch the sun or block the sun, and we're insulating buildings really well. And we've kind of drawn away from that to kind of create these really pretty buildings, but they're not necessarily functioning as highly as they should.
mm. Yeah, do you think, I guess this applies to both of your projects, but even maybe more Celia for yours, since you're like really looking into hardcore performance. Do you think that, or do you plan to like use design to accommodate our current human comforts, what we're accustomed to? Or do you think, because you're both talking about human behavior, do you think human behavior is needed to change before the design, or is the design going to push the behavior change?
So I think when I was first looking at it, you know, I was really looking at bermed architecture, and I think that that would have definitely taken um well, it would have changed human behavior a little bit, but as I'm kind of getting into more strategies and different materials, even just different kinds of glass, um, I think that we can make these changes without really having to change any of our day-to-day activities.
Yeah. All right, we do have a question in the chat. What has been the hardest part of this project? Hardest part, Lolly,
The
you'll hear
comfort
me
analysis.
say, do you mean like the research, like as a student covering this, or like the actual, um, process of like putting together the presentations and, the process?
I think the hardest part of the process was Honestly, research was it wasn't smooth flowing. Like, definitely it took time and you had to really read some things that didn't really make sense to your brain, and kind of dig into them. But I think the hardest part right now is honestly the design process for me, simply because it's just a lot different than what we're used to in school, I guess, in a sense, just with design methodology and other situations that we're working on right now. I just think, yeah, the difference of the process and how fast-paced it is definitely, for me, the most difficult.
Yeah, I think my answer to this question will answer part of your last question too, Kim, is we both kind of got into climate consultant and we're working with all these different graphs that give you so much more information than you even realize. But there was one specific one that really deals with the whole comfort level. And so it basically is giving you these different passive design strategies and telling you what percentage of those will get you to 100% comfortability. And obviously 100% is near impossible to reach, but 90% is a little bit, more reachable.
So that's kind of what we're doing as a whole in
Yeah.
interior architecture. It's definitely trying to make the human population as comfortable as they can be.
Yeah, but I think reading a lot of those graphs and just kind of understanding the data and even just how the data is measured was probably one of the most confusing things to kind of like wrap your brain around and remember.
Yeah. Another question in the chat for both. Do you have an idea for what you want your site to achieve or incorporate the end goal? Ryan, do you mean the actual site? Like Charlevoix or the specific, location, or do you mean the building itself? The whole
Kind of like the building that they're designing, so like the specific site they're looking at right now.
So with me looking into tourism and the tourism industry, I definitely wanted to use self-sufficiency, specifically in Earthship, as a self-sufficient building typology, to promote sustainability and promote these factors of living and to teach others how to use this. So I definitely want to create a hotel and yeah, promote sustainability within our tourism industry. That's my goal.
Yeah, and so my building was it's currently vacant, but it was used as an office building, and so I'm actually going to use it for that same use. But what I'm really taking a look at right now is because we've done so many different tests on our current sites with their illuminance level or their solar access level, I'm kind of taking a look at the different areas of that building that could use help and the areas that are fine, because ultimately the building that I picked is decently insulated, so not all areas of the building need to be completely demoed. So I think for both of us, we're kind of trying to keep as much existing as we can, and what we're changing, we're trying to reach basically self-sufficiency. And for me, that's going to be done with some different insulation. I just started taking a look at different glass that will tint and change colors at the push of a button, which can help kind of mitigate that solar exposure during the daytime or on the south side of the building. So just kind of different stuff like that, really just getting to that net zero,
Yeah.
as close as possible.
For me also, because Earl Young was kind of I am going to be working on one of his recent buildings. I definitely want to look into I've been looking into the historic preservation of Earl Young as well. So I did want to say that.
Another question. After completing the project, are you trying to implicate the designs into a more residential or commercial environment?
Okay, yeah, so mine is gonna be a commercial building, as it is an office building. But my specific floor plan, which I didn't get to show you guys today, but it's basically very blocked off. And so with it being an office building, I'm still considering design and still considering society today. So I'm planning on kind of opening up some of those spaces and creating more um, kind of resumercial spaces for collaboration, because that is really important to today's workforce, I would say, is those collaboration zones where people can come together and not feel isolated.
And then for me, I'm going to be, like I said, a hotel. So that's a commercial like hospitality occupancy. So it's kind of going to once again be used to promote the sustainability aspect. So it's going to be a lot of collaboration, like Celia just pointed out.
Mm. And then another question, where does the first idea or first interest come from for both projects? So maybe, I mean, that's very similar to the first question. Maybe elaborating a little bit more. So like Celia, why is, in addition to being more educated when you go into the industry, like really bringing that expertise, like why specifically net zero? Like, why does it, you just got a huge smile on your face when I just mentioned
Well,
it. So like, because
I'm
you're
thinking
doing
about
this for so long, you have to be, have some kind of passion for it too, I'd imagine.
yeah, absolutely. I think so. I'm laughing because when I first started my capstone project, like even my very first idea was designing for veterans. And then it turned into I did a complete 180 and said, actually, I'm just gonna focus on bermed architecture. I think it's really interesting. I want to look at how it's gonna affect our lives and our patterns as humans. Um, and then as I got more into it, I realized that we don't need to change our lives or our patterns, and there's other strategies that can be applied other than covering a building in earth. And I still haven't completely ruled it out. I'm still looking at berming one side. I'm looking at green roofs, because I do still love the idea of it. But yeah, that's kind of how I got here, was just a real interest in sustainable design.
Um, well, like I said, definitely found a lot of issues within the tourism industry. So that was one of the leading factors. But since you shared what you were going to design first, I was planning on designing a dialysis center. So these two things are very different. But throughout the last 4 years at Western, I've always just kind of wanted to learn more about like well building standards or lead building standards and just really know how we can benefit our environment, meaning that just residential and commercial buildings are some of the leading causes of the largest CO2 emissions. So that really stuck out to me, and realizing that I'm one of the people who can make a difference within the built environment. I definitely wanted to focus on sustainability for that reason.
Yeah, this line of work and line of study makes, designers have the unique position to influence people who are commissioning projects, to make better decisions or to try new materials or try new ideas or think outside of the box. So it's a really great way to leverage your expertise and education to push those initiatives.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot more coming out now of sustainable materials. There's lots of different furniture that is made completely of recycled bottles, and it's 100% recycled and it's 100% recyclable. And so some of those things can begin to be utilized. And I think once the attention is kind of put on those certain companies, other corporations are gonna follow suit eventually.
If we don't make a change now, then a lot of there's not going to be a change.
We're already past due
So,
for a change.
yeah.
Okay, any other questions? All right. Well, Grayce and Celia, thank you so much for your presentations. Excellent work. I look forward to seeing where your work takes you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys
Yeah,
for
thank
joining
you.
us today.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.